Welcome back to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Devin. This always starts with an Well, so I was going to start talking about books, but then we talked about books last episode, and so...
I think we can still nerd out.
Well, yeah, I think I want to ask you what you feel about like space and like how much science fiction, because I mentioned that I pretty much only read science fiction and fantasy books.
Yeah.
So like, do you dive into the sci-fi stuff, or are you only like the nonfiction philosophy nerd?
All right. I do enjoy fiction. I haven't really gotten into science fiction.
Okay.
Other than like Ray Bradbury in school.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Or like Redwall.
Right.
If we think about fantasy. Bring Redwall back. Okay. What do you call it? But as far as like space goes, I think this is something that like really interests me a lot, in the sense of like not understanding the physics behind a lot of it.
Okay.
And wanting to know more about it.
Yeah.
I think I remember watching Interstellar.
Yeah.
And then immediately literally left the theater and texted you and I said, I need you to explain to me what happens in Interstellar. Because there's the aspect of not only like time travel and not being able to, you know, go past currently the speed of light to be able to, you know, go back in time, but like this whole time is different per gravitational pull and all of that. I did a class in college where we talked about that as well, and I was like, this is everything I wanted. Because it is very interesting that like it's time as we believe it on a very base level, and maybe I'm veering off of space, but like just thinking about
I mean, time and space are holding hands all the time.
Like this.
Yeah.
But also like thinking about like Interstellar, like, and time, we think about it so linearly. Like when we think about time travel, we think about like just jumping back to a specific point or jumping forward to a specific point.
Right.
But there's also a theory in philosophy where basically like, you know, there's the whole grandfather paradox, where basically like you can't go back in time and kill your grandfather because then you cease to exist,
right,
sort of thing. But then there's this also aspect of kind of split realities, and like once you do something then it alternates and you just kind of have these fragments. Like think of Loki.
Yeah.
You watch that?
No, okay, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so there was kind of this loophole where basically when you time travel, everything stays as it is, and you're not really able to affect it. You just kind of shift off from the timeline.
You create a new branch.
But then it loops back.
Okay.
So then that branch exists as its own point along the timeline. And so like you time traveling back is now a new branch, and you did some shit, whatever, and you come back to the main timeline when you come back to reality. But that branch exists on its own. It doesn't affect the main timeline that you're in, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so I attribute all of that to also space. And I know that doesn't quite make sense, but to your point, space and time in my head are just very, very close and similar.
Yeah.
And so all of that, like sci-fi, space, time, all of those things, like that's...
Right, well, you can't travel through space without taking up a lot of time.
Right.
Because, like, we can't achieve the traveling at the speed of light, which is the fastest moving thing in our universe, at least as far as we know.
Yeah.
Is photons, speed of light. So like even something that's like only 50 light years away, it'll still take you 50 years to get to that point.
Right.
Which 50 light years is like such a small distance
in the universe,
in the span of even just our solar system and our galaxy. So it's just like you need that time to either like have gravity affect you, where you can go through. That's like the whole black hole thing of like, what happens when you go into a black hole? Are you spaghettified? Are you dead? Do you go into? Do you travel to a different part of the galaxy? What happens?
One of my favorite words, spaghettification. I think it's fantastic. There's a theory that, well, first of all, we know that when you fall into a black hole, for those of you who might not know, do you talk about this? I don't want to like jump the gun.
No,
okay.
We're not talking about it. Well, we're related to the topic that
Got
I have, but not anywhere that we're touching it.
Okay, so basically, and maybe this is a future episode as well, but basically the theory is when you fall into a black hole that the gravitational pull is so intense that you basically become, it's called spaghettification, every atom basically falls into a line and pulls further and further into the black hole.
And you're just a little noodle.
You're a little noodle. But like think about the DNA guy in like Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Where it's just like a bunch of
DNA.
molecules. Yeah, like stacked on top of each other. Like that's basically what you're looking at, but at a atomic level. Your atoms are just in a huge line. But there's a theory that once you pass through that your body basically starts to build itself back up again, and you're shot out kind of like when you shine light into like a crystal, you have all these fragments and like prisms and stuff. You're then basically shot out into an alternate reality.
All of you, or are you spread out through that prism?
No, you rebuild.
Okay.
Yeah, so you kind of like, it's like whoop, and then you go back out the other way. Yeah. So I don't know. That's the theory. But like it's crazy because you're like, on one hand, you're dead because you're getting broken down into an atomic noodle.
You're stretched out and die.
Right.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you're rebuilt, and that goes into more
But then,
philosophy.
like-
we'll go into that later. Because then it's like, well,
Are you the same
are you the
person?
same person?
Right.
But also, like, do you even have the same consciousness or the same memory? Like, your body is still the same.
Are
like,
you alive?
I know, it's a whole thing. But
Well,
anyway.
because like it takes a long time for spaghettification to happen.
Right.
So like, what happens during that time that you are being stretched out?
But also, like, you're outside the ship in a black hole. You're already dead. You've frozen.
Oh, if you have a spacesuit on.
Okay. Are you Sandra Bullock?
No, thankfully.
Which, how did she stop spinning? I don't remember. Do you remember that?
I never saw the movie, but I imagine she probably either threw something or used some type of projection, like either from like blasting air out of her suit.
Oh, maybe that was
or
it.
threw a wrench or whatever she had on her in the opposite direction to either slow her down or...
So if you throw, that would also affect...
Yeah, because it's Newton's laws, where every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Okay.
So, like, if I throw something, I'm providing force in front of... If I'm in the direction I'm facing.
Yeah.
I'm providing force in the direction in front of me, and that's also going to provide force in the direction opposite of me. But that only works out in a vacuum-like space.
Got it.
Because, like, here on Earth, like, I have friction balancing me, like, keeping me on the ground.
Right.
Earth's gravity is keeping me stable. Like, I can just throw a wrench as far as I can throw it without being tossed back.
That's... I don't know. I just remember watching her spin and spin. I was like, she's never going to stop.
No,
You're just going to die. You're just going to die spinning into the universe. Anyway, so this huge time and space tangent, all of that to say, what's our topic about? Keep going.
Well, it's still space related, so that's
Okay.
fun. But it is specifically related to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, otherwise known as SETI.
This is cool.
So do you, we'll start this off with, do you think there's other life out there?
Yeah. I just think that there can't not be.
Okay.
I think that even if you believe in, let's say, creationism,
Yeah.
like, I still think that, like, at that point, if you believe in one God created the earth, all of that stuff, like, they're not spending all
How's
of
he not
their
bored?
time. Right. Like, he's created other things.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, come on now. So, like, I just think that the universe is so large. One, we don't even fully understand how big it is.
Right.
And two, there's no way that, and there's a lot of theories about this as well, but there's no way that our planet is the only planet in the entire universe that's within the
Habitable zone?
Yes, thank you.
Habitable, yeah.
That doesn't sound right though.
No.
It's not
It just sounds like, no. It just sounds like a mumbling.
Yeah.
Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba.
That zone.
Yeah.
So yeah, within the habitable zone.
Yeah.
It's not that. And it's really bothering me. Whatever, we'll figure it out later. There's just no way that Earth is the only planet.
Do you think there's other life within our galaxy? Because obviously, like, the universe, fuck ton of galaxies, fuck ton of opportunities for life to also form. But what about just within the Milky Way?
Within the Milky Way, yes. Within the solar system, no.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I think we would have known at this point if there was other life within our solar system, but not within our galaxy. Because how much of our galaxy have we explored? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think within our solar system, we might find evidence of, like, microorganisms.
Sure.
But I don't think there will be intelligent life as what the SETI is for, the extraterrestrial intelligence.
I think there could have used to have been. And I say that because of what we found on Mars in the sense of remnants of potential like water and things of that nature.
Right.
So if we take it really far back, like I think that there might have been other life potentially on other planets that have then moved out of the solar system.
Oh, like they started.
Yeah.
And then we're like, peace out.
Yeah. And then through the evolution of the sun, then our planet has become the most
in the
zone.
In the zone.
Uh-huh. God damn it. The most in the zone, and so then we've started from the bottom, and then now we're here.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard that phrase before. But...
There.
Habitable.
Let's see what that.
Habitable. That sounds better.
Distance from a star which liquid water could exist. Habitable.
Is
that more how you pronounce
habitable?
it?
Sounds better.
Habitable?
Yeah, because it's a habitat. So habitable. But that sounds even more like we're saying. But
it is
habitable.
We're gonna say.
Can I see it? Can you turn that computer towards me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Habitable. Habitable.
I think it's habitable.
Habitable.
Yeah.
We're sticking with habitable.
Habitable.
Habitable. Yeah. Okay.
Because then I recently saw a video of this moon in one of our outer planets.
Mm-hmm.
I forget which one, but like it was showing it's either Saturn or Jupiter, because one of the most outer rings of this gas giant isn't as solid and defined as the other rings surrounding this planet. And that's where this moon is orbiting the planet in the most outer kind of like fuzzy spray type ring.
Okay.
And it's because the moon is expelling gases and stuff like that from one of its inner layers that happens to have like hydrothermal vents and like water potentially underneath this ice layer. And hydrothermal vents are like hot spots for microorganisms and other life forms to form.
Right.
So like that's within our solar system. So I think that's as close as we'll get to intelligent life at the moment within our solar system.
But extraterrestrial intelligence, I think still that exists. Yeah. But I think that is not within our solar system, or potentially within. I could see on the outskirts of our galaxy. But again, our galaxy's so big,
right? And we're on one of the arms of the Milky Way,
right? So we're not even in the center,
right? Thankfully,
my question is: are the pillars of creation? This is a tangent. Are the pillars of creation within the Milky Way or outside of?
That I don't know. I know it's a nebula.
Because that's James Webb has gotten, that telescope has gotten close and all that, which those photos are incredible.
James Webb's beautiful.
Yeah, incredible.
Pillars of creation, part of the Eagle Nebula.
It's fine. They're beautiful though. If you don't know what we're talking about or haven't seen a picture of them, I would look those up.
The pillars of creation are 6,500 light years from Earth in the Eagle Nebula of our Milky Way galaxy.
Oh, so within the galaxy.
Yeah.
I don't think we've stepped out of the galaxy then.
We've seen other galaxies. I don't think we have powerful enough telescopes to go peek in at other telescopes other galaxies.
Okay.
Because we can scan. I know we can scan stars. And maybe this is just within our galaxy, and see the stars. How close is that star closest to categorized to our star, Sol, and what is the distance from that star to these planets out there? Do they have any planets first off, and is that within the habitable zone?
There it is. We got it, folks. Yeah. So I think it is interesting though that we put so much time and energy also into exploring space instead of the ocean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone looks up to the stars and being what's out there.
I know, we're human.
And it's much easier to explore space than it is underwater.
True. Pressure.
Yeah.
Yikes. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, anyway, I also, speaking of like space, and we'll get into more extraterrestrial life, but like
Right.
I listened to this podcast called Shut 'em Out. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, they're super popular, so it's called And That's Why You Drink.
Yeah.
And so they do like one kind of like paranormal, one true crime story per episode. But they talk about aliens a lot, and also like different types of aliens and like things like that have come to Earth, and all of these, of course, like theories and all of that. And I'm like,
Right.
very interesting that we like have like some pseudo class of alien life. And so anyway, but yeah, that's what I believe. Continue.
Great. Well, the question of is there life out there has been asked for time immemorial.
Yeah.
Even all the way back to the ancient Greeks. We're only dipping our toe back into ancient history. Don't worry.
Casually.
So atomism is this concept that was created or thought up of by Greek philosophers that everything is made up of this invisible stuff that is both infinite, unchangeable, and like indivisible. And so they were like, we know that atoms exist. We know, or at least like we think we know that atoms exist, and we think we know that everything is made up of them. We can't prove it, but that's what it is. And so they were from there through atomism, based off of the Greek word atomos for atoms. The next step was if here on Earth, then there in space. So like if there's life here created by these atoms, everything that we know of and can touch and see and feel are made up of atoms, then why is that unique here? It should be out there.
And they called that midichlorians, right?
Yes. So the Greeks thought of that, and like, which is crazy because the first modern evidence of atoms came from John Dalton, the chemist, in the early 1800s. So we have BCE, 5th century BCE era shit talking about these atoms.
Yeah.
And we don't get true evidence of these atoms until the 1800s. So wild.
That's crazy.
Time.
Yeah.
And science. And so thinking about like, okay, so how do we contact these beings that might be out there?
Sure.
What can we do? Obviously didn't really have that much technology. And so a couple ideas were tossed around to at least contact the Martians, because that was the closest planet.
Sure.
They were like, well, we're a planet. We have people on it. Why wouldn't Mars have people on it? And so you get a bunch of like cool science fiction stories from this, but like they tried to use mirrors and lamps to like signal them up into the night sky, and even built like large geometric patterned structures in like forests, fields, any like big open space, where it was like, oh, let's see if we can signal them.
That's pretty cool.
Right. Like thinking is like, oh, like I can, but like you can observe like this huge structure, like, oh, why not?
Right.
So that was kind of what they did until the 1900s rolls around, and this hot new technology comes in, radio.
Hey.
So we're jumping up into the 1900s, where we're going to hang out for a while. And we have this new technology, radio, to help try to communicate with the extraterrestrials, the ETs out in space.
Yeah.
And we're going to use radio because they can travel. These radio waves can travel vast distances without interference from any like dust and gas and like space shit.
Yeah.
And like through radio waves, you can both send and receive information. So Nikola Tesla gets it on this.
Yeah.
And he even reported having potentially received signals from Mars. So this was again in the early 1900s. He had a massive transmitter tower in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which blows my mind.
Also, you say Colorado?
Do you say Colorado?
No, I say Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado.
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 No, I don't say like it's like go surfing. Colorado. Colorado.
Colorado.
Okay, whatever.
Do you say what state is Las Vegas in?
Nevada.
Okay.
Do you say Nevada?
No, I say
Okay.
Nevada.
Nevada. And
So why don't you
Colorado.
say Colorado?
Because
it's the same A.
Nevada. Colorado. Colorado.
Yeah, I tricked you there.
Well, God damn it. Whatever, keep going.
So Nikola Tesla has this massive transmitter tower in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind because in my head I'm like, oh, he was just in Europe or he was just in New York, whatever.
Sure.
Like, but this fact blew my mind. I was like, what the fuck is Nikola Tesla doing in the 1900s? He was born in 1856 and died in 1943. And like, I don't think of like Tesla and Edison being around in the 1900s. Because I'm like, the light bulb and like I'm like, when did the light bulb get invented? I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm like, that to me is so much older than the turn of the century.
Oh, see, I placed it in turn of the century. But also, you said he was born in 1950 or 1850.
1856.
And then died in 1943.
And Edison was only 10 years older than him.
I thought Nikola Tesla died young. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
I thought he was like killed by the government, like that whole conspiracy.
No, he died in New York. I
Of
think
his
he
own
like had a
volition.
heart attack or something like that. I
Sad.
remember. Yeah. It wasn't like a big thing, but he was kind of forgotten at the end of his life anyway.
Well, because Edison was like, I'm going to take you down.
Yeah. And this facility that he had in Colorado was actually sold and torn down to the state of Colorado to pay off his debts.
Oh my God.
Like he wasn't paying the state anything and they were like, dude, we're going to take this from you. I was like, all right.
Okay.
But anyway, so Tesla has this station built in 1899. And its original purpose is to study the use of high voltage, high frequency electricity in wireless power transmission.
Okay.
His coils and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But during these experiments, he observed an unusual, quote, intelligently controlled signals from his receiver that he concluded that were from another planet. Because he said in an article that he said the signal read 1, 2, 3. Crazy. Thinking it's from Mars. Modern age, it's been speculated that it was actually just receiving a signal from a different experiment happening on the other side of the Earth in Europe from Guglielmo Marconi.
You said that perfectly.
Perfect Italian.
That's how they say it.
He was doing some experiments over in Europe, and he had transmitted ... He transmitted S in Morse code for a naval demonstration. So that's probably what Tesla picked up.
Yeah.
But it was still interesting to see from those experiments that you could transmit information and a signal across the Earth like that.
Yeah.
So the reason why none of that was very successful is because they were using low frequency, low power radio equipment.
Okay.
And it just really wasn't suited for picking up any transmission past our atmosphere. They tried, but they were bound to fail.
Yeah.
Because at these wavelengths of the on the electromagnetic spectrum, I'm just excited and I talk over myself. The ionosphere bends the radio waves. So the ionosphere is this section of our atmosphere that's above the mesosphere. And in this section, it has a lot of ions and free electrons just bouncing around. And so that affects the radio waves at that frequency.
Okay.
So this is great news for people who, especially back then, were listening to AM radio, especially late at night, because you could bounce the AM radio signal off of the ionosphere and it would get a lot farther across the country or wherever you were.
Okay, yeah.
And like it acted as this like radio mirror of sorts.
Cool.
Not great for talking to intelligent life, but you could listen to the ball game.
Yeah. Perfect.
So they're trying to figure out what's the solution here. And It's microwaves.
Hey.
Not what you're heating your hot pocket in. Although similar technology, those are the waves that are heating up your hot pocket. But they're going to be using that frequency of a microwave to breach the ionosphere.
Got it. So General Electric is breaching the ionosphere.
Well, the little wire mesh screen in your microwave actually prevents, like in the door of the microwave, prevents any microwaves hitting you and getting outside of your little electric box.
Do you know what would happen if it hit you?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
At that frequency, because like the stuff that'll damage you is way higher. Like waves higher than our visual spectrum. Like it goes into X-ray and then like gamma ray. Like that shit turns you into the Hulk.
Get my gamma ray gun.
Right. So after World War II, with the huge push in technology from the wars and the Cold War, and all the technological advancement that comes with all that fun stuff, it was determined that using these centimeter wavelengths or microwaves would be the best for communicating over these light years of distance, trying to reach out to these ETs. So the microwave frequency can range from 300 gigahertz to 300 megahertz. So it's a big-ish. It's kind of like a medium-sized section of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Okay.
For context, our visual spectrum is 750 terahertz to 400 terahertz. So it goes our visual spectrum, infrared, microwaves, and then the rest of the radio frequency.
Got it. Okay.
So
we're pretty up there.
Yeah. Well, and then it goes into X-ray, blah blah blah, sure. Dangerous stuff.
Ooh.
So this is like the part of the radio band that doesn't get a lot of traffic because you're not going to be using it for your AM broadcasts. So you're not going to get a lot of like military stuff going on, not a lot of public traffic on that frequency. It's all going to be able to clear for your listening pleasure to the ETs. It'll be able to get through the ionosphere. It'll be able to blast through all of that space gas and dust, and it's going to be able to reach across light years.
Beautiful. To infinity.
So we're excited. So we're going to jump up to 1959.
Okay.
With two folks, Philip Morrison and Giuseppe Conciani.
Okay.
A little bit better on my Italian.
Hey.
They wrote a paper about using specific frequencies within the microwave spectrum.
Okay.
And included a set of targets that they wanted to listen to.
Okay.
So the use of the radio frequency was to the use of radio waves rather was to listen in on specific targets out in space to see if anything or anyone is transmitting back or out into space.
Okay.
So that was our main goal with using radio waves. We're going to listen in to see if anyone's talking out there, shouting into the void. So Philip and Giuseppe, first name basis.
You're so close.
I'm close with everyone I talk about. They were like, all right, we got a great spectrum on the wavelength to hone in on. We got two targets. Let's get it going.
Yeah.
So a year later, 1960, the first Seti experiment occurs. Again, that's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Did they call it SETI at that time?
I think they acronymed it.
Okay.
Yeah. But this project was called, this is what really throws me for a loop. This project, the first project for SETI, was Project Ozma, Ozma.
Okay.
Named after Princess Ozma, rightful heir of Oz. Yes, the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, when you said that, I was like, it can't possibly be related.
No, it absolutely is 100% related.
Perfect.
And here's why. So, Princess Ozma appears in every Oz book, except for the first one, of course. That's why the common folk don't know about it, at least in our generation.
Sure.
it was inspired by L. Frank Baum's supposed communication with Oz, the land of Oz, via radio to learn the events that took place after the book The Emerald City of Oz.
What?
So
So Frank L. Baum is like
L.
guys,
Frank Baum.
L. Frank Baum, sorry.
Yeah, you're okay.
Is like, guys, I have communicated directly with Oz.
Yeah.
And my books
Yeah.
are based on that.
Yeah.
Except for the first one, which was totally my own creative thing.
Well, the first 6 are his creative thing.
Oh, and then he just happened to discover Oz was real?
And then he radioed with Oz
Uh-huh.
and wrote 7 more books.
And
there
was
are
like
14 Oz books, which I had no fucking idea.
First of all, same. Second of all, so he was just like, verified.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah. I mean, he needed the money because
Okay.
he wasn't. I think I read when I was like, how is this all fucking connected? I read that he was like, oh, I'm only gonna write this many books, and he was like, JK, I need more money. I'm gonna write 7 more.
Well, and also like, what a ploy to be like, oh yeah, like no, like it would have been better if he was like, oh, like they transmitted to me in my sleep, and like that's how I got the idea for
Radio's
the
the new hot
like,
shit, though.
Jesus Christ. Next conspiracy theory. Thank you.
Right. So Project Ozma targeted the stars. Go ahead.
Is Ozma also the one who can remove her head?
Oh, I had no idea. I've only seen the first one.
I don't think that's right.
You've
never seen Return to Oz?
No.
Horrifying.
I bet.
Like true. Like yeah. Anyway, keep going.
I know, like, through again reading how this was all connected. Like, Princess Ozma, was born female, turned into a boy, turned male, through magic, to either protect her or stop her from ruling Oz.
Yeah.
And then, like, so she was grown up and raised as a boy, unbeknownst to her.
Okay.
And then they turned back into a female, a girl, or I guess a grown-ass woman at that point. So once she found out that she was a woman, she turned back so she could rule over Oz. And then, like, had Dorothy come in, and, like, Dorothy was like, we're best friends. And then they became best friends.
Oh.
And, like, they never, like, outright said that they had a relationship.
But like...
supposedly in these books, like, Dorothy's the only one allowed in Princess Ozma's room, like, without knocking, and, like, all this other stuff. And they spent a lot of time together.
They were just best friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Just roommates.
Just roommates. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, that's
interesting.
Wild shit. I kind of want to read all 14 books now, but
yeah,
it might be a journey.
I feel like, yeah, go ahead.
We'll do a book club.
There you go. Speaking of books. Yeah.
So Project Ozma.
Yes.
This is headed by Frank Drake.
Okay.
At the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia.
Got it.
So we have this radio telescope out there, and we're going to aim ourselves at the targeted stars Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani.
Perfect. My 2 favorite.
I'm not too good at Latin. Italian.
Latin, not so much.
So both of those stars are similar to our star Sol.
Okay.
And in their heads, we're reasonably likely to have inhabited planets.
Okay.
Good guess.
Sure.
Unfortunately, after 150 hours of observation over the span of 4 months, there was no signals.
Womp.
Right. Failed experiment to an extent, but they were able to at least be like, I can do this. Like,
sure.
We can start this examination. So once Project Ozma happened and, like, it was reported on, there were a bunch of unofficial experiments that took place by other astronomers across the globe.
Okay.
Mostly, SETI was a really hot topic in the U.S., Soviet Russia, and Italy. I think were really the only, like, 3 big spots.
Okay.
And these astronomers would just, like, have some downtime and, like, a spare radio telescope and just, like, start pointing at different planets and stars and be like, what do I listen to? So in 1961, after Project Ozma is all done and whatnot, Frank comes up again, first name basis. Frank comes up with the Drake equation, which might sound familiar to some if you took an astronomy class in high school.
There you go.
But essentially, this equation is more of a thought experiment rather than like a direct answer equation that is supposed to estimate the active, communicative ET civilizations within our galaxy. So you enter in some numbers into the formula of like how many stars will have like planets,
Sure.
etc. But it's not exact. Like there's a lot of like discrimination within the answers you could get by plugging in the numbers. But it was intended to be used as more of like a discussion topic.
Got it.
Among the first Seti meeting. So we have a big Seti meeting with like 10 people. So 1961.
Huge.
Still. The first Seti meeting takes place, again, at this Green Bank facility in West Virginia.
Okay.
It's attended by, and I might screw up some of these names, but I didn't feel like I needed to read out their names just because like they've done work.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be disrespectful.
Fair.
So it was attended by J. Peter Pearman, Frank Drake, Philip Morrison, Dana Ackley, Melvin Calvin, Su Shu Huang, John C. Lilly, Barney Oliver, Otto Struve, and Carl Sagan.
The Carl Sagan? Oh.
Huge SETI guy.
Huge.
So they had this first meeting to discuss the results of Project Ozma and seeing what the future of SETI would be. And they called themselves the Order of the Dolphin because of John C. Lilly's work with dolphins. I think he did like a neuro experiment or something like that on dolphins. And they were like, I mean, it's a bunch of like silly nerds. They're going to call themselves the Order of the Dolphin. And there's even a plaque at the observatory to commemorate their first meeting. So you can go there and see Order of the Dolphin.
I think we got to do a field trip. Let's go.
So like I said earlier, the Soviets had also a strong interest in SETI in the 1960s, as with everyone else, to the point where a Soviet astronomer, Iosif Shklovsky,
Oh, maybe Shklovsky.
Wrote Universe, Life, Intelligence in 1962, which at the time was considered to be like the pioneering book in the field, like the book to read, to have on your shelf if you're doing SETI. Study it. But this book was later expanded upon with Carl Sagan to write Intelligent Life in the Universe, which came out in 1966. They co-authored it. So that became like the book.
Got it.
So SETI was kind of not necessarily a full-on institute or corporation or whatever at the time. It was kind of just like, I'm an astronomer and I have some free time, like I said. That was until November 20th, 1984, when officially the SETI Institute was incorporated as a non-profit organization in California.
Interesting that it's a non-profit. In the sense of it, that makes sense, but like not like a federal. Like it's interesting that it hasn't like reached the government level.
Yeah, it is remained and still is to this day a non-profit organization. And I'll get into a little bit about the funding, but it's not had a lot of luck with funding. So we're in 1984, and a director of research from a university, Tom Pearson, traveled to Sacramento, where the SETI Institute was kind of their home base was at the moment. I believe there was a radio telescope out there. And that's kind of where Jill Tarter was, who was at the time the like CEO per se of what was going on, this whole project. She was the CEO. And so he was going out to Sacramento to deliver the paperwork that was necessary to file as a nonprofit organization. They were like, let's do this. This guy's going to deliver it.
Yeah.
And at this time, there was really only one project in the Institute's portfolio, which was what we've been talking about, a radio search for signals that would prove the existence of other intelligence in the cosmos. So that was like their main focus.
Yeah.
That was kind of it. And it was all headed by, like I said, Jill Tarter. And eventually, Tom was like, this is so great. This is awesome. I'm in. And he becomes CEO. He partners up with Jill, and they go with the SETI Institute.
Okay.
So from there, now that we're like a fully functioning institute, nonprofit organization, we can start getting money. We can start getting funding.
Hell yeah.
NASA is like, hell yeah, let's go.
Right.
Like, pop, love space. It's our whole thing.
Love space. Love space.
And so NASA was obviously a big proponent for this research and provided a lot of funding.
Okay.
Eventually, the one project that was on SETI's table became the NASA SETI program. That was the title for the project.
Okay. They're like, NASA's gonna be first.
Okay. Right. And so this project reached its peak in the early 90s. And it at its height, it was getting $10 million annually to design and build equipment. This was from NASA. The NASA is a government funded operation anyway. So it was from the governments. It was from all these like, it's just from the governments. It was from NASA mostly.
Okay.
And so by 92, everything was ready and the listening began. Ooh. So we were like cashing checks.
Yeah.
We were excited. We were ready to go. Only lasted like a year.
No.
Once everything was built and ready to go.
But tech boom. No.
Yeah. So like within a year, the government funding stopped. And since then until up to this day, it all relies on private funding.
Wow.
Or public funding? Private funding. Because public would be government funding.
Yeah. And like individual people giving. Private would be like private companies. Like, not associated with the government.
Yeah. It's no longer government funded.
Perfect.
It relies on donations.
It's private funded, privately funded, and by the general public.
Yes. There it is. So Barney Oliver, who I mentioned before, he was an engineer, polymath, was an architect for much of the original NASA SETI program. Immediately was like, we need money. Let me call up some friends.
Oh.
He knew some rich fucking people, let me tell you. Those people were Gordon Moore, Paul Allen, and Bill Hewlett and David Packard of the Hewlett-Packard HP, your printer.
Yeah, I was about to say.
So, just some friends.
Casual.
So each of those folks at the time agreed to contribute $1 million annually for a 5-year period.
Oh shit!
So,
that's not 10 million, but it's still pretty good.
It's $4 million each year for 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, like everything's built and ready to go. We at least have funding to keep things operational.
Yeah.
So once they secured that funding, they renamed the NASA SETI program project to Project Phoenix. They're going to rise from the ashes.
Aha, yeah.
And so their goal was to do the same thing, essentially. Look over 1,000 different star systems, using the radio telescopes and the same equipment that the NASA SETI program developed, and just try to find extraterrestrial intelligence.
Sure.
So for Project Phoenix, their first observations took place in February 1995, using a radio telescope in Sydney, Australia, the park's 64-meter antenna.
pretty long. Pretty big.
And in the fall of '96, the Project Phoenix receivers moved from Australia back to Green Bank, West Virginia. Like they took all their equipment, maybe not necessarily the radio telescope, but all their computers and shit.
Like, can I check this?
And so the radio telescope that had been at Green Bank was used to continue their search into the star systems for another 2 years. So they were keep on going.
Okay.
And then we pack up, move again in 1998 to the Arecibo 1,000-foot antenna in Puerto Rico.
Oh.
This one might sound a little bit familiar. It's like that huge dish that's like in like a giant bowl.
Yeah.
And that one to me is like the most famous radio telescope. I know there are like other famous ones.
Like when you picture it, like that's probably what you're thinking of.
That's what I think of. And it was this huge dish. And I say was now because I don't remember the exact year, but a hurricane blew through Puerto Rico. And
was it Maria? Was it recent?
It was fairly recent,
yeah.
like within the past I'm going to say within the past 10 years, but I'm going to think it's within the past 5 years. A hurricane blew through and like
just
did some damage to it that was supposed to be repaired prior, but like now they're like, well, we're not going to repair it. Like we're going to try to like make it a museum essentially.
Okay. Sure.
I guess.
Now, are they moving to try different spots, or are they moving because of funding, or
they're moving it might be because of funding, but
sure.
For the most part they're moving to try to reach different stars.
Sure. Okay.
So like you can only see certain stars depending on where you are on our planet.
Right.
Like we have up here in the northern hemisphere, we have totally different constellations than what they see on the southern hemisphere.
Right.
So you have different access to stars and whatnot. So that's kind of what they're doing. And I think with Puerto Rico being so close to the equator, like it's like, oh, I can see a little bit more broader than being so far in the northern hemisphere, so far in the southern hemisphere.
Fair. Okay.
So they are searching in Puerto Rico, or from Puerto Rico rather, until the early 2000s. That's when Project Phoenix ends. So in the course of this about a decade-long project, Phoenix examined roughly 800 star systems within 200 light years of Earth, and all within the 1,200 and 3,000 megahertz range. And it didn't find anything.
No.
Yeah, they're... none of the experiments have really found anything, but that's also just talking to the massive size of our galaxy, kind of like what we were stating before.
Sure.
There was one experiment that I don't have written down, but it was, and I think it actually comes up later at the Allen Telescope Array, which I'll talk about in a moment, where there's the wow signal.
Okay.
There was someone observing a specific star system, and they got a signal back that spelled out wow. And they were like, oh, wow, like that's, oh, wow. That's crazy.
I was like, it's right there.
It's right there. It's right there. Pick it up. So they're like, that's insane. Let's point all of our telescopes over there, see if we can pick up another signal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was just an anomaly that happened to spell out wow.
Damn.
Wow.
Just like that, too.
Wow. So going back in time a little bit, just to the end of the 90s, a conference was held to determine the future of the Seti Institute.
Okay.
And at that time, it was kind of deemed that everyone needed their own stuff, their own equipment to be able to better observe the galaxy, our universe.
Sure.
Instead of astronomists like fighting over equipment and whatnot.
Yeah.
They needed access to their own antennas and telescopes, etc. And so this led to the design and construction of the Allen Telescope Array.
Okay.
So Allen Telescope Array is named after its principal supporter, Paul Allen,
Mm-hmm.
who is a co-founder of the Microsoft Corporation.
Love it.
Just calling up my friends.
Hell yeah.
And so this is just like a dedicated array of telescopes strictly for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Is that where is it at?
It is in Shasta County, which is, for those of you who don't know, 290 miles northeast of San Francisco, California.
Isn't that like Shasta Mountain or Mount Shasta or whatever?
Probably.
There's some alien conspiracy around that.
Oh, 100%. There has to be.
Yeah. They like believe that there's like aliens that basically came to Earth and like live here and like they live in the mountain.
Wasn't there a Scooby-Doo animated movie about that?
Probably. But is that the one where it's like a bunch of like white little antennas? Not like little. But
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I
There's
mean?
like, it looks like a bunch of, they're smaller satellites, antennas. And they're all kind of like in a line, and
They have like the scoop.
yeah.
Yeah.
They've updated the design since you've probably last seen a picture of it.
Yeah.
But essentially, yes, that. So the Allen Telescope Array, like I said, it's 290 miles northeast of San Francisco, in the Hat Creek Radio Observatory. And this whole array was supposed to have 350 smaller antennas.
Sure.
But guess what? That's pretty expensive.
Shocking.
So like the cost of researching, develop, and construction of all of these telescopes and satellites were just a little bit over budget. And instead of getting 350, we're stopped at 42.
I was gonna say 50,
Small fraction.
and not even that.
So the first phase of it was done once it was built at 42, and the whole facility finally became operational in October of 2007.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
Sorry, I'm just thinking about right before the economy collapsed.
right. That's probably part of why we stopped at 42.
Right.
And so, like, because of all of this search for extraterrestrial intelligence became so popular in the 90s and stuff like that, it was such a boom. Like, that's where we kind of see the obsession with aliens. I mean, like, of course, like, there was a bunch of, like, other stuff, like, in the 50s and whatnot with Roswell and whatnot. But, like, we had shows like X-Files pop up.
Twin Peaks
pop up. Like, all of this great media coming on. And even Carl Sagan himself wrote, it turned out into be a novel, but it started out as a movie script. And then, like, the movie wasn't going to be made. And so he was like, fuck it, I'll just turn it into a book. And then it eventually became a movie. And that one is called Contact, a fucking phenomenal book and movie.
Ooh, okay.
10 out of 10 recommend.
Yeah.
But it is a sci-fi novel, so I don't know if you like it or not.
Better or worse than Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
I mean, this is a classic. This is like...
Got it.
Mwah. I mean, like, it's a hard science fiction book, so, like, the difference between hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi is, like, hard sci-fi uses, like, straight science, full-on facts, like there's no warp drive in a hard sci-fi. In soft sci-fi, you're gonna get like Star Wars, Star Trek kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay.
So it's a hard sci-fi knowledge that deals with contact with a more technologically advanced ET life form.
Yeah.
And it's includes a lot of like the stuff that I just talked about from Seti and like the whole Seti program. Like it uses all that, like even the facilities. Like in the movie, they have a scene where Jodie Foster, like Matthew McConaughey, like meets Jodie Foster at the radio telescope in Puerto Rico. Like that's a big part of it. It's like, yes.
Here we go.
And so that's kind of like where SETI is at. Like that's the history of SETI and like the SETI Institute.
Okay.
They're still relying heavily on people funding them. Like they're no longer getting any funding from the government. it's still a continuous search. It's not on the forefront of anyone's brains at the moment right now.
Sure.
And like you can find out if you want to give money to them, you can go to their website, I guess.
Yeah.
And find out more about their history and stuff like that. Because I was researching all of this, and there were just so many points of connections to other things, like fucking Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Like the guy who Lord Kelvin of the Kelvin scale, which is like infinite, not infinite,
Like cake house?
absolute zero.
Oh yeah.
Like all that temperature scale. Like he was involved in this in the 1800s with the Italian fella that not messed up, but it was also like getting Tesla's signal. Like
Right.
he was involved in, like there were so many different points that I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna click this hyperlink and like look at that. And I'm like, oh no, now I need to go here. It's like the SETI is such a weird, like interconnected web of a lot of points of history and science history that just through like the development of SETI and other things brought all this technology together. And it was wild. I really tried a lot hard to condense it, and like I'm a little scatterbrained trying to talk about it because
Sure.
there was just so much information going
Yeah.
into my brain about it.
Totally. I think, well, my question is, have they tried like a different tactic at all? Or are they just sticking with microwaves? Because I think about like a highly intelligent like life form in a different galaxy, whatever it might be.
Right.
Like, are they even set up to bring in this radio frequency? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, have we like adjusted? Have we checked and adjusted? You know what I mean? Or are we just like, we're sticking with this for 40, 50 years?
Well, like the funny thing is that we're searching for life as we know it.
Right.
So like again, we can talk about like what if there are other types of life forms out there
Right.
that aren't familiar to us. We are only able to send and receive signals at the speed of light. So if we're sending something, like I said, 50 light years away, they won't get it until for 50 years. But if they're
Right.
sending something to us, then it's like, oh, this message is 50 years old at this point.
Right.
So it's all kind of just trying to listen and see if anyone at any point had sent something out there.
Sure.
Because like at the moment, while with these radio telescopes we're sending very direct beams of information, the Earth itself is just broadcasting shit
Yeah.
out into space because of TVs, radios, satellite radios. All this technology hubbub is just blasting out interference and bullshit into space.
Right.
That could be going on for who knows how long. There's a there's a really funny bit in Futurama where like these aliens are watching an old sitcom from Earth, and then like their connection gets interrupted. Like they can't see the season, like the last bit of the season finale, so like they come and invade Earth just to get
the last.
the last bit.
I can see that happening.
So like that, I think that's the trick. Is one, we're assuming that any other intelligent life is going to be exactly like us,
Sure.
and at least have the same technology that we can communicate with them. Because I mean, if they don't, then we're fucked anyway.
Right.
And then two, like it's just taking a long time for any information to come back and forth.
Well, I think a really good movie that does like a good example of like extraterrestrials that aren't like us is like Arrival.
Yeah,
I think that's so well done,
it's
and
like from a linguist standpoint, too.
right,
It was
which
beautiful.
is beautiful. Like
Right.
it's so cool, but
Yeah.
also like how do we like we can't communicate because we're just set up so differently. You know what I mean? We're different beings, we're different creatures, we're whatever it is. And so
Yeah,
like
yeah.
yes, we're looking and expecting this human life or humanoid life that might not exist. You know,
Right.
or they understand science very differently than we understand it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So even think of like the Drake equation or anything that we know currently that only sits within our confines of science today.
Right.
You know
Well,
what
I
I
mean,
mean?
like we sent out the golden record that has like a history of humanity on
Right.
it, and it has like how we do math, what we look like, where we are within our solar system, in case anyone finds it out there. Like it has like a map to us, which is a little scary.
Yeah.
But like it's our best way to be like, so this is how we do shit. Like, this is how we talk. This is
Right.
our cool song that we like to listen to. Here you go. Like,
Right.
here's your tablet to try to translate.
Well, and we're constantly always like updating. Like I even think about in a very like not trivial, but we always think that atoms are the smallest form of like matter, and then we find quartz. You know what I mean? So like,
right. Then you get into the quantum physics of it all.
Right. Oh, that's another episode for you to do. Okay. But it is it's great that there is a dedicated like force out there looking for extraterrestrial life. You know what I mean? I think that is something to put money into. I think that is something that is very like viable. It's just a matter of what are the tactics that are happening? Like, how do we either expand those or, try different ones, or do we just, wait till they show up?
Right. And like, which, no.
Or do we go out there? Like,
Yeah.
how close are we to like being able to like teleport or warp? You know what I mean? These kind of
Right.
science fiction heavy
Yeah.
concepts. Like, is that something that will do we think eventually be possible within physics that we know?
Well, I think with us traveling far into space, the technology isn't going to be warp drive or teleportation, at least for quite much longer than I can think of. But it would be more along the lines of putting humans into stasis.
Yeah.
And then having like a generational thing happen on the ship.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we're just going to send an arc, essentially, of humans out into space, and they're going to have their own lives. We're going to put them into stasis until point X, and then that's when they're going to start coming online, starting a new human life out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, again, Interstellar.
Yeah.
But or even just the concept of like 50 years on Earth.
Yeah.
Can be so drastic. Like, I could age 50 years staying on Earth. You could go out and come back and have aged 2 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
there's the twin experiment of a twin stayed on Earth, and then one twin orbited Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the twin on Earth and the orbiting twin were different ages once he came back down.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay.
Which, again, like, is that, like, does that fall into the realm of, like, time travel? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see that.
You see it? You get it? I think it's interesting because I think that while Seti, and this kind of like I think falls into any sort of space or physics kind of thing.
Yes.
Seti is so determined on like focusing on finding extraterrestrial life, which I think again very valuable. But also there's just so much that filters into that. Like there's so many like aspects of physics and science in general that like combs in. So like, like to your point when you're like there's so much happening, like of course there was. Like you could probably focus on just the Allen like aspect of it, you know what I mean, for an entire episode. Like
that's kind of what I felt like. I was like, oh my god, did I pick way too broad of a subject? And I did, 100%. Looking at it now, like I could have just done an episode on Project Ozma and like gotten into that and like gotten a little bit more into the specifics of the Drake equation that came from this.
Right.
So it's just like I think it's such a broad topic that you can dive into so much more into at your own leisure. But like it's fascinating. It's crazy. And like I think kind of what you said earlier, like it's worth putting money into to expand these projects and stuff like that. I think that's the trick, is that we're not going to really see a jump in this search until we get that $10 million a year again.
Right.
You know, like we had that huge technological advancement from that funding, and now we're just kind of stuck.
Right. Well, and I think that like this drives progress and innovation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like war, like the Cold War, things like that drives innovation. And this is kind of in a unfortunately slower way.
Yeah.
Like still, like I think there can be a lot of advancements and new findings that come out of this project just based around how much, how much science and how much physics goes into it.
Right,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
And all the checking and adjusting and the things and the blah, 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 blah,
Right.
You get it. All right. Well, all that to say, thanks again, Dev.
Yeah.
And
thanks for listening.
Thanks, folks. We appreciate it. You can find us on all the social medias, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. You can find us at whatdoyouknow_podcast. On Twitter, a little different. That'll be WDYK_podcast.
And you can listen to us anywhere you download podcast.
Yes, you can. All right.
And make sure when you find us on those podcast streaming services, you give us a little follow, a little like, hit them 5 stars, give us a little feedback. You know the drill.
Yeah, baby.
We've all seen all those YouTube streamers.
Right. Please do all of those things that they say. All right. Well, thanks, Dev.
Thanks, Nick.
Bye-bye.
Bye.